All right, Isaiah 35. Isaiah 35 is a great chapter. So let's back up a little bit. The first, 13 chapters or so, 12 chapters of Isaiah was presenting the case that Judah and Israel as a whole were disobedient children, and that God would discipline them if they didn't do right. Now, they could do right, and then God would not have disciplined them, but we know history, and they didn't do right, at least not all the time. And so God disciplined them, and then in chapters 13 and following, he was building the case that you shouldn't trust anybody except for him. Don't trust anybody except for God. And he went through with all the burdens where, you're going to turn to Moab and ask them for help. Well, the Assyrians are going to wipe them out. You're going to turn to Egypt and ask them for help. Well, guess what? The Assyrians are going to wipe them out. You're going to turn to Assyria for help. They're going to turn against you. And so he goes through this, building this case bit by bit by bit until there's no excuse for them to look for help outside of God. And then God says, and these are how I'm going to judge those that turned against you. And was it part of God's plan?
Yes.
Yeah. Did he cause them to attack God's chosen people?
He didn't have to cause them to do it. They wanted to do it.
They
but
acted,
he allowed it
yes,
to discipline his people.
And so what they did was wrong. The Assyrians were wrong. The Syrians were wrong. The 10 northern tribes were wrong. And God judged them because of it. And so where we ended up in chapter 34 was using Edom as an example. This is what's going to happen to those of you who went up against my chosen people. This is what's going to happen, and I want the whole world to hear, because I'm going to judge the whole world. And it ended on a really down note. Let's see. Where's a good place to pick up? How about verse 9 of chapter 34? And the streams thereof shall be turned into pitch, and the dust thereof into brimstone, and the land thereof shall become burning pitch. Sound like a nice place to visit?
No, thank you.
Just ask Jimmy and Matthew, because they weren't quite to this point, but it was almost this hot. We actually learned today that Laura lived right in the Boca Chica area. So she knew exactly where they were at. And so anyway, and it gets worse from there. It's not going to be quenched night or day. The smoke's going to go up forever. The birds are going to live there, but nothing else. There's going to be nettles and brambles, and God's going to judge. And verse 16 confirmed it, that what God said he'll do, he'll do. Seek ye out the book of the Lord and read. No one of these shall fail. And so, again, pretty negative note if we just left it right there. But chapter 35 came, and I think I gave you a plot spoiler, a little bit of a teaser trailer, and we read those first two verses. The wilderness and the solitary place shall be glad for them, and the desert shall rejoice and blossom as the rose. It shall blossom abundantly and rejoice even with joy and singing. The glory of Lebanon shall be given unto it, the excellency of Carmel and Sharon, and they shall see the glory of the Lord and the excellency of our God. That's the exact opposite of what we just read in chapter 34. And so the question is, when does this take place? So we have this radical contrast from Edom. Edom was a place that much of it actually was very fertile, very verdant, nice green bushes and grass and stuff. And look what it is even today, and look what it's going to become. And now we have chapter 34, contrast that with the first two verses in chapter 35. We have the exact opposite. We go from being a desert to being a fertile, lush land, a place where you would want to be. And this has already been hinted at. If we go back to chapter 30 of Isaiah, chapter 30 and verse 23, then shall he give the rain of thy seed, that it shall sow the ground withal, and the bread of the increase of the earth, and shall be fat and plenteous. In that day shall thy cattle feed in large pastures. The oxen likewise, and the young asses that ear the ground shall eat clean provender, which hath been winnowed with the shovel and with the fan. And there shall be upon every high mountain, upon every high hill, rivers and streams of waters in the day of the great slaughter when the towers fall. So there's going to come a change where the towers fall. Which towers? The towers of Babylon, the towers of the world. And God's going to replace it with what this world was supposed to be. Chapter 32, verse 15 and following. Until the Spirit be poured upon us from on high, and the wilderness be a fruitful field, and the fruitful field be counted for a forest. Then judgment shall dwell in the wilderness, and righteousness remain in the fruitful field, and the work of righteousness shall be peace, and the effect of righteousness quietness and assurance forever. And my people shall dwell in a peaceable habitation, in sure dwellings, in quiet resting places. And so again, there's coming a day where this will all be changed to the opposite of how chapter 34 ended. So the question is when? Well, there was an immediate answer to this, or fulfillment of this, because once the Assyrians were destroyed, remember what the Assyrians had been doing, they didn't just one day pop up at Jerusalem. They had been on a campaign, and they'd been destroying and taking out city after city after city. So what happened when they were finally destroyed and chased back to Assyria? What happened to Judah?
Well, Assyria left them alone, so they were able to
Rebuild.
normal
Yeah.
behaviors.
So in one sense, this was fulfilled then, only in a partial sense. But compared to being destroyed by the Assyrians and having them perched on Nob Hill ready to come down and destroy Jerusalem, to suddenly they're gone and you can go back out and work in the fields, a partial fulfillment. Today, modern Israel, much of the wilderness, much of the wasteland, much of the deserts in Israel now are what?
Irrigated
Yeah.
and growing lush with crops.
Yeah. So we've got a partial fulfillment there. But it's going to be ultimately fulfilled
In the millennium.
in the millennium. And so we've got some partial fulfillments, but the ultimate fulfillment hasn't happened. Earth is still waiting. Keep your marker there in Isaiah 35 and turn back to Romans chapter 8. Some of you know where I'm heading with this. Romans chapter 8. And verses 19 and following. Romans chapter 8, verse 19. Actually, let's back up to we'll back up to verse 18. We'll read down through like verse 22. For I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. You know, even with terrible things that happen in our world, compared to what we have ahead of us, it doesn't matter. I mean, terrible things happen to people. But if you're a child of God and you've got the hope of eternity, you can endure the worst. Again, read Fox's Book of Martyrs. Verse 19, for the earnest expectation of the creature waiteth for the manifestation of the sons of God. For the creature was made subject to vanity, not willingly, but by reason of him who has subjected the same in hope. Because the creature itself also shall be delivered from bondage of the corruption unto the glorious liberty of the children of God. That's what we're looking forward to. And verse 22, for we know that the whole creation groaneth and travaileth in pain together until now. Until now being when? Not when Paul wrote this.
No, and not right now.
Not
when
right
we
now.
read it. But in the millennium.
The millennium. So creation's waiting. It's groaning. Okay, there's a little bit of anthropomorphizing here of creation. But this world, okay, you can't say it knows, but if it could know, it would know it's not what it was designed to be because of sin. It's looking forward to the day. And again, that will be the ultimate fulfillment. So verse 2, back in Isaiah chapter 35, verse 2 explains a little further. It shall blossom abundantly and rejoice even with joy and singing. How much joy and singing is there when you have failed crops?
Not a lot.
None.
Yeah,
Zero.
yeah, not much. But there's going to be joy and singing. The glory of Lebanon shall be given unto it. What's the glory of Lebanon?
Giant trees are
Yeah.
what it's known for.
Yeah, it'll have its giant trees back. The excellence of Carmel. What's Carmel known for?
Delicious
Sundays.
ice cream topping.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
Cindy.
Well, that's where Elijah triumphed over all of the Baals.
and Carmel actually was known as a beautiful land. We've been getting pictures from Matthew and Jimmy as they travel, and we've shared many of them with you. But the pictures from the Rockies, just incredible. That's our creation. And think of it, when I say our creation, it's God's creation given to us. That's after the fall.
And it's still pretty
Beautiful.
great. Yeah.
Beautiful. And Carmel was known to be a beauty. If you could stand on Mount Carmel and look around, it would, man, this is beautiful. And so that it's going to be back to that. And then the final one, and Sharon. What do we know? What's Sharon known for?
roses.
The Rose of Sharon?
Yeah, and again, very fertile country, and growing crops and I guess roses. And so it's all going to be given back. All these places that have because of sin, because of the fall, have lost this. It's going to be given back to them. And then it says, strengthen ye the weak hands and confirm the feeble knees. That's kind of an interesting take. Depending on where you place this statement. Is this during, after, or before verses 1 and 2, would you say?
Well, I would say at the beginning of it, either before it or at the beginning of it, strengthen those who are weak. Come on, better times are coming.
Yeah.
And confirm or firm up the feeble knees. You can do it, here, let me help you. It's gonna get better. You just have to make it a little bit farther.
You're on a long hike and you are ready to collapse, and your friend comes up to the alongside you and says, hey, hang in there, we just got to go over this one last hill and we're there. Guess what? You can make that one last hill. Now, if he hadn't said that, you might not make that hill, because you think there's another hill on the other side and another hill on the other side, and I quit. But a little bit, as soon as we get over that hill, you're going to be able to see camp. We're almost there. And that you strengthen the arms, you firm up the knees, and you head on. And again, this came in the midst of Israel or Judah being chastened by God. I mean, yes, God's giving them hope through Isaiah. This is what's going to happen, but that's not where they're at yet. But because it's going to happen, they can strengthen themselves and they can continue on. Verse 4, say to them that are of a fearful heart. Do you think when the Assyrians were on Nob Hill, there were some fearful hearts?
Yeah.
I would think so. Be strong and fear not. And then I like this. Behold, your God will come with vengeance, even God with a recompense. He will come and save you. And he did. As a matter of fact, flip over one page, and what's the title? What's your Bible say, Cindy, on chapter 36?
Chapter 36?
Uh-huh.
Oh, going the other way. The first invasion?
Okay, so
Historical parentheses, Sennacherib's invasions and Hezekiah's illness.
yeah, and so
We know some more bad stuff is coming.
bad stuff, but we also know what happens with that bad stuff. If we flip on over, and so God says, "I'm going to come with a vengeance. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. I will repay." He's going to come against Assyria. He's going to destroy Assyria, and he's going to come and he's going to save the children of Israel. He's going to save the Jews. And then verse 5, we see some really familiar statements. Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened, and the ears of the deaf shall be unstopped. Then shall the lame man leap up as an hart, and the tongue of the dumb sing. For in the wilderness shall waters break out, and streams in the desert. Bethany?
Yeah.
What's the lyrics to that song where the I heard, said the deaf man, and do you know which song I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Lazarus.
Um,
How's that go?
he saw it all. I can't remember.
There's a song about the blind man saw it and the deaf man heard it, and but hey, let me tell you, this is Lazarus, you know, and he died and came back, and so we've got all these events. Do you think that that'll happen in the millennium?
I do.
That the blind will see and the deaf will hear? I do too. Can you think of any other time that it happened?
When Jesus was on earth, he
Yeah,
went around curing
Exactly.
people of stuff like blindness
Um,
and repairing limbs lame from birth.
yeah.
I mean, that sort of thing was common around him, and that's why people came from all over, dragging their fellow with the palsy on a
Lowering
cot,
down,
yeah, and busting up the roof and pushing him on through so that
Yeah.
he could be healed.
Do you remember when John the Baptist was in prison? He's discouraged, which, you know, being in prison would be discouraging. And he was beginning to doubt. Was Jesus really the Messiah? I mean, that's what John the Baptist had been preaching. You know, he knew Jesus, his cousin. And so he had John's disciples go to Jesus and ask. Remember that? And Jesus says, go back and tell him what you're seeing. The blind are seeing, the lame are walking, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear. By the way, it's Matthew chapter 11. That was a terrible paraphrase, but it was this exact phrases that Jesus was saying. This shows you that I am who you think that I am. Was it a full, complete fulfillment?
No.
Are there still blind people,
Yes.
deaf people,
Yes.
lame people?
Yes.
So obviously it wasn't a complete one, but it was an evidence that yes, Jesus is the Messiah, and yes, there will come a time when all of the blind will see and the lame shall leap and so on. That would be that. Oh, let's look at a few New Testament verses. Keep your marker there in Isaiah 35. Let's take a look at Matthew chapter 11. This is an exact quote of what I was paraphrasing. Verse 4. Then Jesus answered and said unto them, Go and show John again those things which ye do hear and see. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised up, and the poor have the gospel preached unto them. And then jump down to verse 21, where he began to upbraid them because they didn't repent when they saw his miraculous works. Woe unto thee, Chorazin! Woe unto thee, Bethsaida! For if the mighty works which were done in you had been done in Tyre and Sidon, they would have repented long ago in sackcloth and ashes, and so on. So Jesus did these miracles. Chapter 12 of Matthew. Chapter 12 of Matthew. Seem to be in 13. Matthew 12, verse 22. Then was brought unto him one possessed with a devil, blind and dumb, and he healed him, insomuch that the blind and dumb both spake and saw. And the people were amazed. And so, again, you see the very things that Isaiah prophesied fulfilled in part because Jesus was here on earth. It wasn't his time to fulfill completely, but it was an evidence because, well, let's face it, who can do that? Okay, modern medicine can do a lot.
Yeah,
There's
but
still-
if you've been blinded, modern medicine cannot restore your sight.
Yeah, there's still blind people. There's still people that can't hear. There's still people that can't speak. We can only do so much. But Jesus could and did. Let's see. So verse 6. Back to Matthew chapter, not Matthew, sorry. Back to Isaiah chapter 35. Let's see, the lame man's going to leap as an hart. Remember the lame man from birth? And Jesus healed him, and he says, rise up and what? Take up
Take up your bed. Take up your
bed and walk.
Yeah.
Um,
Get up, pick that up,
If-
and go on home.
I've never been in a cast. I've never been lame since birth. But if you haven't used those muscles, even if somehow whatever caused the lameness was cured, guess what you don't do immediately?
Get up and
Leap up and walk.
Yeah.
Leap like a deer.
Yeah, exactly. For that matter, toddlers are called toddlers for a reason.
They toddle.
Yeah. He was lame since birth.
You probably didn't even have those. I mean, like you said, if you broke your leg or something and were in a cast
Right.
for an extended period of time, you would have had those muscles, but being months out of practice, they would not be functioning properly.
And then knowing
But
how,
if you were lame from birth, you probably didn't even have them to start with.
and then if you were given them, how do you know how to use them?
I found the lyrics to that.
Oh, yeah, okay, share those lyrics.
I was trying to catch the crippled man. Did he run past this way? He was rushing home to tell everyone what Jesus did today. And the mute man was telling myself and the deaf girl he's leaving to answer God's call. It's hard to believe, but if you don't trust me, ask the blind man. He saw it all.
Which sounds like I don't know, a riddle or something that,
Yeah.
except that's what happened. The blind man did see, the mute did speak. And so the lame man's going to leap up as a hart. The tongue of the dumb sing. Same thing. If you've been mute for your whole life, now maybe if it was something that happened later on, but if you never were able to speak, do you start singing?
You wouldn't even know how to talk.
Yeah, yeah. How do you form the
You were
words?
Miraculously healed, that in and of itself wouldn't give you
Mhm.
the muscle patterns
Exactly.
to speak. I mean, it's hard to believe since I haven't stopped since, but I had to learn how to talk, and it took me a while.
Yep. Yep.
But with constant practice since then, I've done very good.
All right. So, and then it kind of switches gears a little bit on us again. The lame man leap as a hart, the tongue of the dumb sing. And then why? For in the wilderness shall waters break out and streams in the desert. I probably should have looked up Louis L'Amour because he's got several stories where somebody was on their last legs in the wilderness and at the last minute a little bit of water trickled down from somewhere. Would that look good to you at that point? Well, the wilderness is going to have water. They're going to break out the streams in the desert. And this is interesting. And the parched ground shall become a pool. It's interesting because the word parched there, literally in the Hebrew means a mirage.
Means what?
Mirage.
Oh.
And so, which is a pretty good image of the world. The world offers what looks really good. But the problem with mirages is when you actually get there,
It's not there.
there's nothing fulfilling. But instead of this mirage, instead of the parched ground, it's going to become what? A pool. So where there was nothing, now there's a pool of water. And the thirsty land springs of water. In the habitation of the dragons where each lay shall be grass with reeds and rushes. If Doug were here, he would ask me, so what were the dragons here? Well, they could have been dragons.
Probably dinosaurs.
Could be. Yeah, I mean, there's enough historical myths and legends to make you believe that, and enough consistency among them to make you believe that there's some sort of a basis for it. Dragons. Were they dinosaurs?
Maybe.
Could be.
I've got this translated as jackals. Could it have been that? Could be.
Yep.
I mean,
It's,
it's not specific, and with the image they're trying to portray, I don't think it's critical.
exactly. It's tough translating from an old language. Because if you don't have that word used consistently in other passages, all you can do is kind of look at the etymology of it and oh, I see it's kind of, yeah. And prayerfully, you know, I mean, the translators prayerfully considered these words. I don't have a problem with it being a dragon. Very well could be. Speaking of dragons and dinosaurs, Michelle, in
Yes.
Sunday school, we're doing a video series on unlocking the mysteries of Genesis, and next week it's all about dinosaurs. So I know mornings are tough for you,
Really?
but I think you would enjoy it. It's been a really good series.
Huh,
So
okay.
that's my invitation.
Thank you.
I understand that that third shifters have a problem shifting to first shift.
Very much, yeah.
All
If
right.
you wanna ride, let me know. It's
Thank you,
available.
Cindy. Okay, thanks.
So there's going to be grass and with reeds and rushes. What you don't have in parched ground,
Read.
Reeds and rushes,
Rushes.
even if you can grow weeds or grass or shrubbery or stuff like that.
It's fair.
Reeds and rushes
Those do
require damp ground.
exactly. Yes.
Those are not, like, you know how when there's rain in the desert, it rains once and then the stuff all pops up and blooms real quick
Uh-huh.
and then it all
Yeah.
dies. This isn't something that pops up after one rain.
And then verse 8, and a highway shall be there, and a way, and it shall be called the way of holiness. Now we know the way of the Philistines. This is the way of holiness. And it's
Pretty
interesting.
sure it's not the same path.
Yeah, I think we can be confident of that. Although God could take what was profane and turn it into holy.
True.
But I think you're right. In this case, it is not the way of the Philistines. But the Hebrew word for highway literally means high way. So this would be a raised, elevated road. Why do you raise an elevated road?
To keep it dry.
To keep it dry, Beth?
Make it level.
To make it level. This was
Easier to fill in than to carve out.
yeah. This was designed to be easily traveled. And a highway shall be there, and a way, and it shall be called the way of holiness. The unclean shall not pass over it. Okay, that tells me it's not the way of the Philistines. But it shall be for those, the wayfaring men, though fools, shall not err therein. Isn't that kind of reassuring? The fools shall not err therein. If they're on the highway, how many of you ever played, gone bowling with the bumper?
I do way better.
Oh, yeah.
Although I've seen kids manage to put one across 2 lanes with the bumpers in place. But what do? They keep you online, and this way is going to keep you on track. Verse 9, no lion shall be up there, nor any ravenous beast shall go up thereon. It shall not be found there, but the redeemed shall walk there. Why is it good that there's no lion on that highway?
I wouldn't like to come to a lion if I were walking along trying to get someplace.
Right.
I would not at any,
In fact, I'd be inclined to turn around and go the other way.
the opposite way of the way to holiness. I don't know if
Uh-huh.
you'd want to do that, but
Well,
but
if there was a lion there, I might.
but our adversary appears as what?
Oh,
A
roaring
roaring lion. Would he like to have you turn around and head the other way?
Yeah.
Yeah. The boys at Boca Chica, they saw a lynx, but the warning was you have to watch out for poisonous snakes and alligators.
Yeah, they sent me a picture of that.
So if you were walking along the way of Rocket Ranch, there might be alligators that appear on the road that you're on.
That would convince me to go the other
I would
way.
definitely be turning around and
Where are they again? I thought,
So
I'm sorry.
they're in Houston. Actually, they're headed to
Oh.
Flint, but they're not Flint, Michigan. They're headed to Flint, Texas right now.
Oh, okay. I've heard that. There's a Flint down there.
Jimmy, for Matthew's graduation gift, gave him a trip to Texas.
Oh, wow.
They went to SpaceX, Boca Chica. We'll show you some pictures afterwards.
Okay.
And then today they took a tour of NASA's control center in Houston.
Oh, my gosh.
They went through the Rockies, they're coming back through Missouri and then heading home. Tonight they're staying at,
coming back where?
through Missouri where Jimmy's former roommate lives.
Yeah.
Tonight they're staying at Bethany's Aunt Wendy's in Flint, Texas.
Texas.
Yeah. So,
You said alligators, and I thought they were in Colorado.
They were in Colorado.
Right, but I'm trying to
But,
put
yeah.
alligators in Colorado.
Usually
Never heard that.
Okay, so no lions there, you're protected, no ravenous beasts shall be found there, but the redeemed shall walk there. And so it's a highway of holiness. Where do you think that highway ends up?
In Jerusalem.
In Jerusalem. And when do you think this highway is?
I think it's in the millennium.
Yeah, and so it's not just
Let us go up
Jerusalem.
to the house of the Lord.
Yeah, and literally the house of the Lord at
the
that point.
temple.
Because where's Jesus?
There,
On the throne.
yeah.
In Jerusalem, and the highway takes it there.
You think it'll be like all roads lead to Rome, except all roads lead to Jerusalem?
Really, it will be,
I believe.
because the world will come to the Temple Mount. Remember how big they're going to make the Temple Mount?
Yeah, it was something
Huge.
like ginormous.
I mean, like the width of Israel, 35 miles.
Yeah.
This is what Spurgeon said. The construction of this highway of holiness is the greatest engineering feat ever accomplished. Engineering has done much to tunnel mountains and bridge abysses, but the greatest triumph of engineering is that which made a way from sin to holiness, from death to life, from condemnation to perfection. Who could make a road over the mountains of our iniquities but Almighty God? None but the Lord of love could have wished it. None but the God of wisdom could have devised it, and none but the God of power could have carried it. Could have carried it out. And so, yeah, I think it's the fulfillment of the road that Jesus did establish for us, a road to forgiveness, to being born again, to eternal life. And then we end, and the ransomed of the Lord shall return and come to Zion again with songs and everlasting joy upon their heads. They shall obtain joy and gladness, and sorrow and sighing shall flee away. Can you think of another place where it says there's no more sorrow? Revelation 21. Let's turn there and we're going to be done. We're going to be done early. I knew we'd be done early. This is a short chapter. Revelation chapter 21, and we'll go ahead and read verse 1. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth. Who's speaking? Revelation 21.
Paul.
It could be Paul on the Isle of Patmos, but it's probably
Probably John.
But it was
John. It's John. I'm sorry. I was teasing you, Beth, because that's the one that I confused.
Well, that's all I remember is the story.
The
Yeah.
story, that's the answer.
That's the problem with.
Yeah.
Yes. That was the problem with the VeggieTales song about what was the chocolate?
Bunny.
The bunny. It was a bad song. I mean, but it was such a catchy song. I mean, it was the
The bunny was.
It was
that
the King
Nebuchadnezzar.
trying to entice the three young Hebrew men to eat or bow to the bunny.
But it was such a catchy song that kids would sing it all over the place, and they finally changed it. So. But anyway, so this was John.
Okay.
And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a great voice out of the heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them and be their God. Verse 4, And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow, nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. And so, no more sorrow, no more death, no more tears. That's the culmination of those first 34 chapters that start out with, Israel, you're a disobedient child. I'm going to chasten you and discipline you. By the way, you don't have to be. You can actually do right, and then I won't have to, but they didn't, and he did. And then what would happen to those nations that God allowed to be used to chasten them? Don't count on your neighbors, count on God. And then the end result, what they're counting on, is that God will fulfill his promises. And remember this morning in Romans chapter 15, what was the confirmation page where they confirmed the promise of God? What confirmed the promise of God?
When it happens.
Yeah, when Jesus came, Jesus confirmed the promise of God by fulfilling the promise of God. Isaiah is saying this is what's going to happen. And for us, we know it's going to happen because we've seen the coming of Jesus. We've been given the gift of salvation, and we know that God will keep his promises. And so what's written in Revelation, what's written in Isaiah, it's going to happen. How should that impact us? Well, it ought to give us hope. It ought to have us strengthen up our arms and firm up our knees. And it ought to have us compassionate enough to tell Jesus to the others. We went through a whole chapter in one night, and we're done 10 minutes early. Any questions or comments? By the way, the next chapter won't go this fast.
I was just thinking, like you said, the first 35 chapters of Isaiah are basically scolding the Israelites for their bad behavior, but scolding them with a view of restoration. And I remembered, this is chapter 1, verse 16. Wash yourselves, make yourselves clean. Put away the evil of your doings from before mine eyes. Cease to do evil. Learn to do well. Seek justice, relieve the oppressed, judge the fatherless, plead for the widow. Come now, let us reason together, saith the Lord. And
But wait, that's the God of the Old Testament. Isn't he the one that's wrathful and unmerciful?
oh, and he hates women.
And he
I'm pretty sure I
hates
heard that
women.
someplace. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not telling us, stop what you're doing, turn to me, do what I tell you.
Yeah. That's what a loving parent does.
And if you don't stop, there will be consequences. And they didn't stop, and there were consequences. They weren't pleasant. That's the whole point
But the
of
purpose of
discipline.
the consequences is
Restoration.
restoration. Yeah. And anybody who ever tells you that about the God of the Old Testament, ask them, have you read it? And chances are pretty slim. Not always. There's some who have. Okay. Well, then let me ask you a quick question. We've had several people wonder if we're going to do a church picnic. What are your thoughts?
Well, we certainly can.
What are your thoughts about when?
I knew that was gonna be your second question. I just knew it. Yeah, well, we've done it, often we've done it in
Yeah.
August. Sometimes the end of July.
Well, the end of July is quickly approaching.
You and Grandma don't have plans
We
to
haven't
go to
made solid
Julie's, have
plans
you?
yet, no. Other than maybe August.
We could plan it around, I don't know, corn from the Ostreicher farm.
Well, that's a
Yeah.
worthwhile, point of,
When
It usually comes to the end of July, so in August it should definitely be available. Unless the drought is killed off.
although I was thinking of the corn, you know, they say knee-high by the 4th of July. And one of the fields that I drive past routinely was knee-high, or a little better by the 4th of July, but we got some rain, and I'll tell you what, you read, the fertile field will be as a forest, and
Uh-huh.
it's only been 2 weeks, and it is as a forest. And, yeah, I mean, I know it gets even taller, but wow, it just grows so quick.
This is August.
We've got the 5th, 12th, 19th, 26th of August.
I mean, my calendar shows wide open on any of those, but that doesn't
I'm
mean
not
it
sure
really
when
is.
Jimmy actually starts school, do you know, Beth?
I do not know.
You don't care.
I made a point of not learning when the first day of school was.
I think that 3rd week though, so.
I would say, let's go early in August versus
Maybe the
late
5th.
in July, like maybe the 5th.
Okay.
And then too, if we had to postpone, it
Then
wouldn't
we
be,
could postpone the
we'd have some wiggle room.
The 5th would probably work well because either the 12th or the 19th is probably when Matthew's going to try his level 2 certification flight.
Maybe we
Oh, the
wanna go 1
19th.
week before that?
The 19th is the day that
The 19th?
yeah.
Okay.
How about July, can you show me July?
28th of August is students' first day.
Okay.
Um,
Let's not do it on that day.
That's 23rd.
Do you wanna maybe back up 1 week to the 29th of July? Not aware of any conflicts I have then.
No, the 5th should work. It was the 19th, the 19th of August is when
Yeah.
his flight is. I think that his Matthew's certification flight.
Oh,
So I like the 5th, is that,
Yeah,
Suits
let's-
me.
okay. I'm gonna assume, Bethany, you just put in church picnic?
I did.
Because I went to click on it, it already says church picnic. I'm like, it wasn't there, it wasn't there a moment ago.
Do you have the psychically powered one?
Yeah. Nope, just my wife.
Better than that.
You can- you can
5G
go.
is pretty powerful.
In case you're wondering, we have a shared calendar, so.
Did you put it on Google? Cause doesn't that mean it jumped right